You are sitting in the beige, quiet office of a mortgage broker. You feel prepared, meticulous, and financially pristine.
Your FICO score flashes on the screen, a triumphant 802. You are smiling, ready for the congratulations, already planning the housewarming party.
The broker slowly slides the pre-approval paper back to you across the polished desk. Rejected. The terms are laughably poor, or the loan amount is dramatically reduced. Confusion turns quickly into boiling frustration. How is this possible? You followed the rules. You paid every bill on time for a decade. The score is nearly perfect.
This is where the mathematical misdirection occurs. My name is Roby, and I spend way too much time thinking about the invisible equations governing your perceived financial freedom.
I obsess over the silent algorithms and the subtle psychological levers that decide who gains access to liquidity and who remains perpetually excluded from prime status.
The FICO score is merely a performance review from an expired job. It is a lagging indicator. It is a systemic camouflage hiding the true levers of lending power.
We must introduce the concept of the credit score trap. It is designed to keep you busy optimizing a number that rarely tells the full story when high liquidity is truly needed.
The score lied to you because it focuses on historical compliance rather than immediate capacity and behavioral character, which is what the proprietary lending models actually prioritize. We are diving deep into the 5 financial metrics that lenders review when they underwrite substantial risk. These are the metrics that kill the 800 score dream. The first, and arguably the most brutal gatekeeper for large loans, is the debt-to-income ratio, commonly abbreviated DTI. This is not subjective. It is mathematical inevitability. The FICO score may show you are reliable, but the DTI shows if you have the margin for error required to absorb a new liability, like a mortgage or a major equipment loan. Lenders look at 2 ratios. The front-end ratio, which measures housing costs against gross monthly income, is usually the public face of affordability calculations. But the real power lies in the back-end ratio. This is where the unseen vampire costs of your current life truly reveal themselves to the underwriter scrutinizing your application file. The back-end DTI calculates all minimum monthly debt payments, student loans, credit cards, auto loans, plus the proposed new housing payment, divided by your gross monthly income. If this total exceeds 43%, sometimes stretching to 50% for certain conforming loans with heavy reserves, you hit the wall. Your application is flagged immediately for decay. An 800 score with a 55% back-end DTI is statistically viewed as a higher long-term risk than a 680 score with a clean 30% DTI. The capacity is simply not there for absorption. Your perfect payment history means nothing if your current monthly obligations consume too much of your liquidity. This brings us to the second critical metric, the utilization deep dive. FICO measures utilization based on the current balance versus the credit limit, ideally aiming for under 30% and optimally under 10% for maximum scoring impact. But the proprietary models look deeper. They are not merely looking at the current percentage. They are studying the velocity of utilization and the frequency of high balance reporting. They are looking for psychological dependence on revolving debt. If you are consistently running your cards up to 50% and then paying them down just before the statement date. This pattern suggests living paycheck to paycheck and using the credit facility as a necessary buffer for immediate consumption rather than a tool for managing expenses. A lender sees a high-velocity utilization pattern and reads instability. The system knows that a sudden loss of income would instantly push those balances past the breaking point. This behavioral assessment is weighted far heavier than the static FICO score in the final underwriting decision. It moves the borrower into the category of high-stress liquidity trap risk. Next, we examine the third critical factor, which measures stability, character, and prediction. Time on job, and time at residence. These are pure proxy metrics for future reliability. A FICO score does not factor in career trajectory or geographical routes, but the proprietary lending model views these elements as critical components of risk assessment geometry. If you have held 5 different jobs in the past 3 years, even if your income is increasing,
The lender views you as a flight risk, prone to economic dislocation and sudden default.
The underwriting assumption is simple. Stability of employment equals stability of income, which equals stability of repayment. This preference for inertia is financially rational and ruthless.
Similarly, frequent residential movement is viewed negatively. If you move every 12 months, it suggests a lack of deep community roots and makes physical tracking harder in case of default.
The optimal borrower is geographically and professionally inertial. They are predictable, they are stationary, and they are less likely to vanish when the economic winds turn harsh and cold.
This stability matrix often negates the benefit of a high FICO score for younger professionals who are naturally pursuing rapid career advancements, requiring frequent geographical relocation. The fourth element is perhaps the most shocking to the average consumer. The lender reviews your actual banking relationship behavior, seeking signs of behavioral chaos. They demand access to bank statements. They are not just checking the balance, they are auditing the transactional frequency and, critically, the frequency of non-sufficient funds, or NSF events.
These invisible equations treat NSF fees and repeated overdraft penalties as mathematical proof of financial desperation and poor liquidity management, regardless of the overall account balance.
One missed payment on a credit card impacts FICO, but a dozen overdrafts in 6 months reveals a deeply embedded pattern of financial mismanagement that FICO is utterly blind to tracking. Your credit report is historical and siloed. Your bank statement is real-time, granular, and exposes the psychological vulnerabilities that lead to financial entropy and inevitable late payments.
The existence of numerous payday loans or title loan transactions, often viewed as fringe banking activities, triggers an immediate and catastrophic downgrade in the internal risk score.
These are considered clear signs of operating in the subprime decay layer, even if you manage to pay them off quickly enough to avoid reporting negative marks to the 3 main bureaus.
The lender is less concerned with what you have paid back and more concerned with the financial distress that forced you into those high-interest liquidity traps in the first place.
Finally, we analyze the fifth critical factor, which is the velocity of new credit acquisition, often called the hard inquiry aggregation. This metric triggers the panic algorithm instantly. A high FICO score often requires opening new accounts infrequently to maximize the average age of accounts. But sometimes people open 5 accounts simultaneously to arbitrage rewards.
Even if you maintain perfect 1% utilization across all 5 new cards, the algorithmic underwriting system sees that cluster of activity as rapid leverage expansion risk.
The interpretation is that the borrower is preparing for a sudden, significant increase in spending capacity, or that they are preparing for a major cash deployment requiring high liquidity.
This burst of activity is flagged as desperate searching, even if the intentions are perfectly pure. It suggests the borrower is actively maximizing their leverage potential just prior to the loan application. Lenders prefer dormant behavior. They prefer the borrower whose financial life remains steady and unchanged for years before the application, demonstrating predictable control.
A high FICO score encourages you to optimize the number, but optimization often requires opening new credit products, which counterintuitively dramatically lowers your internal lending profile.
This creates the ultimate financial irony. By striving for the highest possible FICO score, you may inadvertently trigger the behavioral warnings that prevent you from using that score for its intended purpose.
The FICO score trap is successful because it convinces you that the goal is the number, when the true goal is the avoidance of any signals that suggest instability or high-capacity risk.
We need to redefine what financial health actually looks like when you are approaching a major capital event. It is not about optimization. It is about elimination of systemic risk signals. Step 1 is the surgical reduction of the back-end DTI. This may require aggressive prepayment of consumer loans, not just minimum payments, months before you even walk into the bank.
You must eliminate the vampire costs associated with perpetual revolving debt. The balances need to be mathematically zero, not just under 10% utilization for reporting purposes.
Step 2 demands stability theater. If you are planning a major loan, you must enforce a period of radical inertia. No job changes, no address changes, and no new lines of credit for 12 months.
Presenting a perfectly flat, boring, and predictable profile is the greatest financial asset you possess when dealing with institutional underwriters who prioritize minimizing systemic uncertainty.
Step 3 is the ruthless auditing of your primary banking accounts. You must purge all evidence of behavioral lapses, including overdrafts and NSF fees, using a higher margin of liquidity.
If your behavior suggests you cannot manage a checking account without incurring penalties, the lender correctly concludes you cannot manage a six-figure mortgage payment during periods of stress.
You must treat your bank account statements as a psychological risk assessment document, not merely a record of cash flow. It must reflect discipline, not just activity. Understanding this systemic reality fundamentally changes the advice given. Stop trying to hit 850. Start focusing on minimizing your back-end ratios and maximizing your stability signals.
The difference between successful underwriting and rejection often boils down to 5% DTI or a recent job change, not the 20 points difference between an 800 and an 820 score.
The FICO model is a necessary starting point, a filter, but the proprietary lending models are the true judges, assessing liquidity depth and behavioral character under a microscope. They are looking for dead equity and potential liquidity traps hidden within your monthly budget. They are looking for reasons to price the risk higher or to avoid it altogether.
Financial success in this highly leveraged environment requires internalizing the fact that the institutions are not your allies. They are risk managers seeking mathematical inevitability of repayment.
They are not interested in rewarding your past discipline. They are interested in guaranteeing their future yield with minimal exposure to the volatility inherent in modern consumer life.
Break free from the psychological burden of optimizing the single number. Concentrate instead on the invisible structural variables that truly govern access to institutional capital.
This is the hidden cost of the credit system we were never taught. This is the truth behind why a perfect score still leads to a demoralizing rejection at the moment of highest expectation.
If this breakdown of the invisible equations governing lending decision algorithms provided value, please smash that like button now. Help this content reach others trapped in the FICO cycle. Subscribe for financial sanity and advanced analysis on the psychological warfare inherent in modern consumer credit systems. We spend way too much time thinking about these hidden systems.
Remember, the score is a distraction. The underlying structure of your capacity and character is the only metric that ultimately matters when the stakes are at their absolute highest point.
We will continue to expose these systemic traps in future analyses, focusing on how institutional pricing models secretly penalize stability and reward the extraction of debt equity.
Share this script with anyone who believes their high score guarantees them prime access. They need to understand the true cost of the back-end DTI ratio before they apply for that crucial loan.
Thank you for engaging with this difficult truth about financial power and the structural dishonesty embedded within the simplified credit scoring system designed for consumer management.
Focus on the mathematical certainty of your cash flow margins and the unshakable stability of your life architecture. That is the only score that truly moves the needle for the serious lenders.
The obsession with FICO keeps the masses distracted, while the actual underwriting decision is made based on entirely different and often proprietary metrics that remain obscured from public view.
We must decode these invisible systems to achieve true financial sovereignty, moving beyond the consumer facade and into the reality of institutional risk calculation geometry. This transition from optimizing the number to optimizing the structural integrity of your financial profile is the core lesson required to beat the system at its own highly lucrative and specialized game. The path to prime lending is not paved with 800 scores. It is paved with low DTI ratios, deep stability, and pristine transactional banking behavior over extended, predictable periods of time. Prepare your financial life for the microscopic scrutiny it will inevitably face, ensuring every metric supports the narrative of infallible capacity and zero internal financial volatility risks.
That is the price of access, And understanding this price is the first step towards securing the capital required to build genuine wealth outside of the established and restrictive consumer frameworks.